Okay, everyone, great. So good Davach. Tonight, from what I'm told, this is the first of this type of series of classes. I'll try to introduce to you what the idea is, what the content is, and we'll try to jump right into the class itself. When you first confront or deal with or work with a secular person who becomes interested in Judaism, almost initially they become very turned on to the wisdom and to the chachma, to the beauty. That's almost initial because it's there and it's what they see. What happens a little bit into your relationship with them, which is very important, your relationship with them or your discussions with them, is they begin to maybe wonder the following question. They said, if I buy in to this whole Judaism thing, so what I'm also going to have to buy into is the fact that God appeared on a mountain in front of 3 million people and gave a book. And that becomes a very difficult thing for them to accept. The beauty and the wisdom is easy to accept. It's there, it is beautiful, it is wise. But the fact that God appeared on a mountain in front of 3 million people and gave a book is something that they find to be a little bit uncomfortable. And they begin to ask themselves the following question. Can they remain thinking, intellectual, reasonable, rational people and still become religious? Can they become people who are thinking, rational, reasonable? Can they still remain intellectuals and buy into this religion called Judaism? And that's what we're going to try to discuss tonight. Whether or not a person can indeed call themselves an intellectual, call themselves a thinker, call themselves a rational person or a philosophical person, and still accept this religion, in particular the fact that God appeared on a mountain and I feel like a weatherman. Yeah, it put on a mountain and revealed himself to 3 million people. That's the question for tonight. If we were to maybe reframe this question a little bit, so the question would look something like this. The question would be, is that event that happened on Sinai, that event that Moses gave the Torah to the Jewish people on Mount Sinai, is that something that we can know, or is that something that we just have to believe? That would be if we reframe it slightly, the question again would be, is that event on Mount Sinai something that we can know occurred, or something that we just have to believe, or not believe? So let's try to get a few definitions over here, and just make sure that we're all on the same page. Can anybody give me an example, give me a definition? Yeah, a definition of knowledge. Anyone, a definition of knowledge? Yes. Okay, I'm not going to rephrase what you're saying, although I think we're saying the same thing. I think we'd say it like this. A conclusion that we come to, or a truth that we accept, based on logic and evidence. Again, a truth that we accept, this is knowledge. A truth that we accept, or information that we accept is true, based on evidence or logic. That would be a good definition of knowledge. So let me ask you a question. Can you give me a good definition of belief? Belief. What would you say is a good definition of belief? Anyone? Nobody. Very good. A truth that we accept, or a piece of information that we accept, based on no evidence, or not enough evidence. It's generally because we'd like it to be the case that we accept it. And now we have two words over here that we've now defined. We have knowledge, which is something we accept based on evidence or logic. And we have belief is something that we accept based on usually what we want. Yeah? Or despite lack of knowledge or lack of evidence. Okay. That's so when we say it like this, when we say, is the event of Mount Sinai, is that something that we can know, or is that something we can believe? What we're really asking is there evidence that points in the direction that this event at Mount Sinai occurred, or not? Is there evidence to the point where we can know that the event occurred? Or is it just something that we either believe or we choose not to believe, or we choose not to believe? Now, there's a little bit of an extension to this concept called knowledge, and I want you to hear this well, because this is a big point. Listen carefully to this. While it's true that knowing something requires evidence, and I can only know something because of evidence or logic. Logic and evidence I'm used interchangeably because indeed they are. However, I never have to have 100% evidence to know anything. I never have to have 100% evidence to know everything. I can know it even without 100% evidence. I'll give you an example. Is there anyone in this room that has ever wondered whether or not their mother is really their mother? Anyone? Yeah, okay, there's always one in the room, yeah, but usually there's a reason for that. But everyone else seems pretty confident that your mother's your mother. Yeah, and I have a question. How are you so sure? What would you say? DNA test. Okay, first, have you ever done a DNA test? No. But even if you did, maybe the DNA test was mistaken. And maybe it wasn't mistaken, but your mother paid off the lab research because she really wanted you to believe that she was your mother. Could be. You don't know for sure. Anyone else? How do you know your mother's not your mother? Your mother is your mother, yeah.
No one else put up with me.
No. Okay, you win. No, just joking. Okay, no one else could put up with you. Okay, that may or may not be conclusive. It's amazing that actually, there was some person out there, could be, that she's not your mother and she decides to put up with you. Anyone else? Chazaka. We're not religious at this point. Hold on. No, wait till after class. What? You don't really know. You don't really know that your mother is your mother yet. None of you, let's just say it this way. I'll say it a bit differently. You do not have 100% evidence that your mother is your mother, but nevertheless, no one in this room is willing to accept that she's not. And everyone in this room is willing, except for maybe one, is willing to say that you know your mother is your mother, even if you don't have 100% evidence. And I'll explain to you why. Because even though you don't have 100% evidence that your mother is your mother, nevertheless, it is very unreasonable to say that she's not. And if you have to weigh the choices, does it make sense that she is or make sense that she's not? So there's much more point in the direction that she is than point in the direction that she's not. Are we following this? And I can know something as 100% true, even if I don't have 100% evidence. I'll give you another example. None of you in this room know that I'm not going to pull out a gun right now and kill you all. You don't know that. Now, as I'm saying this, you're running through your head, right? But I want to make a point that all of you are still in this room right now. And what's more is that this is probably the biggest decision you have ever made in your entire life, is whether or not to sit here right now. Because I might pull out a gun and kill you all. And you're still sitting here. Now, let's discuss why you're still sitting here. The reason why you're still sitting here is not because you're hoping they bring out more food later. That's not why, because they're not. No, just joking, they might. That's not why you're still sitting here. You're sitting here because you're thinking to yourself, well, how much sense does it really make that he's going to pull out a gun and kill us? I'm saying, he doesn't really look like he knows how to use a gun. I mean, he doesn't look very intelligent at all, actually. So I doubt he could probably kill us. And what's more is you're thinking to yourself, I don't know, Rabbi Rosen's a nice guy, but why would he hire someone who's going to kill us? It doesn't make sense, right? So that's what you're running through your mind. And even though none of you have 100% evidence that I'm not going to kill you, you know that I'm not, to the extent that you're willing to put your life on the line for it. Are we following the train of thought? Yeah? And to know something means that the evidence points in the direction that it's indeed true, even if you don't have 100% evidence to it, and so on and so forth. None of you know. All of you flew, I assume, everyone here is from Chutz La'aretz, all of you here flew in an airplane. Now you did not have 100% evidence that plane was not going to crash. Yet all of you got on the flight. Okay, the nervous ones in the group were a little fidgety on the flight. Yeah, a little bit wondering what's going to be. And when you landed, you cited, a sigh of relief. But I just want to tell you that was only stage one. You still have to get from the airport to Yerushalayim or to your yeshiva, and you had no idea if that was going to be a success. A car could have crashed. There's so many ifs. Yeah, but none of you live in that world of doubt, if you're healthy, because you can know even without 100% evidence. Are we following this? Yes, maybe so. So, yeah. So when we talk about knowledge and belief, so yes, knowledge is built on evidence. Knowledge is built on evidence, and belief is not. But even though knowledge is built on evidence, I do not need to have 100% evidence to know. I do not have to have 100% evidence to know. And the fact that there's a maybe, or couldn't it happen, or might it be thrown into the picture, that's never enough, if the evidence is substantial enough, to take away my knowledge. Are we following this? Okay. So when we go back to our original question and we frame it appropriately, so our question was, can we know that this event of Montana occurred, or must we just believe it? So what we're saying is, do we have enough evidence pointing that direction that I can know that it happened, Or must I just believe it? That's really the question. And the way you determine whether you have enough evidence or not is if the alternative is unreasonable. Yeah? If it's crazy to say my mother's not my mother, or it's insane to say she's gonna shoot me, or it's really difficult to assume that the plane's gonna crash, I can know that the other side is true, even though I don't have 100% evidence. Let's try to take this the next step and reframe it once again. Really, really what we're asking in this class is the following. Can we categorize this event of Maimon Har Sinai, or can we categorize it as a historical fact, or must we just call it a fable or a legend? Yeah. Can we categorize this event of Maimon Har Sinai as a historical event, or must we just call it a legend? Let's try to define our terms over here as well and see what comes out. Can anyone give me an example of a legend? Anyone? Yeah.
Paul Bunyan.
Paul Bunyan, excellent. Any other ones? Good.
King Arthur.
King Arthur, very good. Any other ones? Yeah.
Johnny Appleseed.
Johnny Appleseed, excellent. These are all good examples of legends. I have another one. How about this one? If you're not American, you may not know this. Very good. George Washington in the cherry tree. Very good, cherry tree. Yes, George Washington, and the first time I ever gave this class to a group of British students, and they had no idea what I was talking about, so I always make sure to say that. George Washington in the cherry tree. The legend goes as follows. George Washington, as a young kid, his father had a cherry tree in his backyard. Well, one fine day, George goes out with an axe and chops down the cherry tree. His father confronts him and says, "George, did you chop down the cherry tree?" And George responds, "I cannot lie, it was I." And this is some type of unbelievable praise of our first president, which I never really got, but apparently that's okay. Now, let me ask you a question. This event, does anyone here know that it occurred? Does anyone here know that it didn't occur? We don't know. You can either choose to believe it or not. The only two people who really know if this event occurred is George and his father, and they're both dead. So we cannot ask anybody whether or not this event took place, and that's what makes it a legend. You can choose to believe it or not. We have no evidence for, we have no evidence against. I have no reason to assume that event took place. I have no reason to assume it didn't take place. I can choose to believe it or not. That's what makes that event in world history a legend. A legend. George Washington, the cherry tree. Now let me ask you a question. Who can give me an example of a historical fact? Anybody? World War II. Very good. How about even earlier?
69.
That's what we're talking about. Anyone else? The Revolutionary War of 1776. Yeah, let's go with that. Revolutionary War in 1776. For those of you who are from Britain, that's when we beat you. Anyone from Britain? Great. Sorry. Anyway, so let's talk about this for a second. Let's say I would claim that event did not happen. There was no such thing as a Revolutionary War. What would you say to me?
Wrong.
Why?
There are historical accounts of it happening, and I know these guys. No one would lie or even cite it because there were so many people who were involved in it, and then their parents told them, and it just doesn't make sense.
And what about George Washington and the cherry tree?
There was one guy.
Oh, that's the reason why?
What?
That's the reason why. I mean, it's two guys, but yeah, it was two people as opposed to new. Okay. Maybe I hear. Let me take what you're saying and say it this way. That's illogical. I could tell you the Revolutionary War didn't happen, right? But you're going to say to me, well, what about all the history books? And I'm going to tell you they're all lying. And you're going to say, you're telling me that the entire world somehow agreed to lie on this point. And I'm going to say, yes. And you're going to say, well, what about the artifacts? So you go to the certain parts of the United States, on the East Coast, you'll find there's museums of the Revolutionary War. And I'm going to tell you they're all fake. You're going to say at a certain point that is totally unreasonable. Correct? Yeah. And that's what would make it a historical fact. Because denying it becomes unreasonable. Now, none of you were in the Revolutionary War, nor do any of you know anybody in the Revolutionary War. Nevertheless, denying it becomes unreasonable. Once denying it becomes unreasonable, So then we can know it occurred. Remember, our definition of knowledge is that I have evidence that it happened. It never has to be 100%, and there can always be maybe the whole world agreed to lie about the Revolutionary War. Maybe, but it's not compelling because it's hard to accept. Maybe all the museums were made up. Maybe, but maybe I'm going to shoot you, and maybe your mom's not your mom. It's not a compelling maybe. Yeah. So when the maybe is not compelling, and the alternative is much more compelling, then we can accept it. Not the alternative, but the actual claim is more compelling. So then we can accept it and know it as a historical fact, even though you didn't see it yourself. We following this so far? How about this? Let's say I were to tell you that the Holocaust did not happen. Now there are people who claim that. And my guess is, I don't know, but my guess is that many of you, if not all of you in this room, disagree with those people. Yeah? But I want to ask you something. How do you know they're not right? I mean, you're vehemently against them. In fact, if you were ever to meet a Holocaust denier, you would fight them. But I want to know why. You weren't in the Holocaust. So how do you know? How do you know they're not right? What? They're lying. They're lying. You've never met liars before? And I'll tell you what their motivation would be in case you're wondering. They were paid a whole lot of money.
All of them?
Jews have tons of money. Tons and tons of, look at this building. Jews have tons of money. Yeah? Tons of money. And they wanted to start a state of Israel, so they had a great idea. Why don't we make up a claim that the entire world turned against us? And then we go to the UN and make our plea. Yeah? How could they say no? So they paid billions of dollars to people to claim they were in the Holocaust, tattooed their arms. Until this day, the world has bought into it. Prove me wrong. You can't. Nevertheless, none of you are willing to say the Holocaust did not happen because the evidence is too overwhelming. Now, are you sure that what I'm saying is not true? No, it could be. But I could also shoot you, and your mother might not be your mother, and the maybes aren't compelling. When you're claiming a maybe, you always have to measure what's more compelling, the claim or the alternative maybe. And if the alternative maybe is simply not compelling, or forces you to twist everything that you understood to be reasonable and rational into a pretzel in order to accept this, really most of the world, almost all the world believes in the Holocaust. Even the Germans agree about the Holocaust, right? Except for, the neo-Nazis, right? So to say, well, the neo-Nazis are really right and everyone else is really wrong, could be, but you're not willing to say that. Because that's that is an illogical conclusion to come to. And therefore we can know, indeed, that the Holocaust is a historical fact. So just to summarize what we have so far and sort of package it before we take the next step, is that in order to know anything, all you need is evidence towards it. You never need 100% because there will always be maybes. How do you analyze the maybes? The maybes have to be, if the maybes are less reasonable than the claim, then you're going to go with the claim. Again, if the maybes are less reasonable than the claim, you're going to go with the claim. If I tell you that Poland built tons of concentration camps in order to create tourist attractions, because what else is there in Poland? And they needed something for people to come and give money to their economy. Now that's a maybe. It could be. Auschwitz, fake. Poland did it. You know how many tourists? You know how many millions of dollars they make a year? Poland off of Jewish tourists who go to Poland. What a brilliant scheme! A brilliant scheme. Yeah. Now, you don't know that I'm wrong, except that sounds totally unreasonable. Maybes are a dime a dozen. You have to be able to analyze how reasonable this may be, and what's more reasonable, the claim itself or the maybe. If the maybe is unreasonable, I will dismiss it. Just like your mother may not be your mother, dismissed. Or I might shoot you, dismissed. Because the claim itself, or the alternate possibility is so much more reasonable, willing to accept it. And so when we ask, is that event at Mount Sinai, is it a legend or is it a historical fact? Really what we're asking is there enough evidence to support the fact that it occurred, that the maybes are unreasonable? And if the maybes are unreasonable, we conclude that it indeed is a historical fact. So far so good? We're following the train of thought? Excellent. Fine. Let's try to take it to the next step. And what I want to do now is tell you a riddle. I'll tell you a riddle. I want you to hear the riddle, then I want you to think about it, and we'll take it from there. And the riddle goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a king. Now, this king was an unbelievable king, loved by all, brilliant, warm-hearted, incredible leader. He had 3 sons. Each one of them had one of the characteristics of the king. One of them was brilliant. One of them was warm-hearted. The other one was a leader. Everyone in the kingdom always wondered which one of these 3 princes will take over for the king when inevitably one day he'll die. Who's going to be the next king? That was sort of on the minds of the members of the kingdom. The king died an untimely death. Died. And left no indication of who he wanted to take over. Well, the princes themselves were very loyal to their father. No one wanted to assume the mantle of leadership without having confirmation from the father. So for months, the kingdom went without a king. Every morning at breakfast, the princes would eat together. One morning at breakfast, one of the princes said to the other 2 princes, "My brothers, I know who's supposed to be the king." And the brothers turned to the brother and said, "Tell us, who's supposed to be the king?" He said, "Me." He said, "Why do you say that?" He said, "Because last night, my father came to me in a dream and told me to tell you that I'm supposed to be king." What should the other 2 brothers say back? What do you think? Oh, very good. The other princes should say, "Look, my dear brother, our father was brilliant. Our father was an amazing king. Our father was a wise leader. If our father wanted us to know that you were king, so then our father would have come to us in a dream and tell us that you're the king, not come to you and tell you to tell us." Now, the rule of thumb goes like this, and hear this well because this is going to be a big step. The rule of thumb is that if you ever want a message given over, if you can, do it yourself. Don't tell someone else to do it for you. Because, first of all, the person hearing the message may not know it's true. And secondly, you never know if the message is going to be transmitted properly. So if you ever have a message that you want to get to someone else, the best thing to try to do is give him a call. Meet him. Giving it through a third party is not wise. And that's exactly what these brothers should say. If our father wanted us to know that you were king, he would have come to us directly. He's not going to tell you to tell us. Now let me ask you a question. How many religions have there been in world history? Take a guess. Thousands, good. Let's get a little more precise. What do you, anyone?
13,000.
Not bad. 4,000? Got machlokas, 13, 4. Okay, 15,000. 15,000 known religions. Now what's interesting is, and listen to this, 15,000 known religions, every single one of them, except for one, started by God going to a person and saying, "Listen, tell them that I'm God." He went to a person and said, "Tell them that I'm God. Tell the world that I'm God." Or tell a group that I'm God. The only religion that did not start that way is Judaism. Judaism started by God appearing in front of everybody and saying, "Hi, I'm God." Now I have a question for you. Why would religion maker-uppers make God do the less logical thing? Why would religion maker-uppers decide to make God do something that's not as reasonable? Remember, we spoke about before, if you ever want to get a message across, the worst thing to do is to tell someone else to tell them. The best thing to do is to give over the message yourself. So why, when 14,999, that's a very large number, and that's all, why would they claim that God went to one person and then told that one person to tell everybody else that he's God? Why did he just go to the people themselves? In other words, if I were making a religion, so then I would want to make God do the most reasonable thing. If God is a message, he gave it over. So why is that only one religion made God do the most reasonable thing? Judaism. Judaism began by God announcing himself face to face in front of 3 million people. Why did no other religion claim that? That's a question. And I want us to put that in our back pocket as we progress to the next stage of the discussion. I'm handing out source sheets over here. Keep these in front of you because we're going to need them in about a millisecond. Let's try to pass them back as quickly as possible. Here's what I want to do now. We're discussing, can we know whether or not this event at Mount Sinai is it a historical fact or is it legend? Can we know it or must we believe it? So our rule of thumb whenever analyzing historical facts is to try to analyze the possibilities. Now there's really only two possibilities. The two possibilities are that God gave the Torah on Mount Sinai or that someone else, not God, started the religion. Those are the only two possibilities. Yeah? Either God started it or somebody made it up. Somebody made it up. Those are the only two possibilities. But on the side that somebody made it up, there are four scenarios about how this religion got made up. Again, there's only two possibilities. Either God made up the religion or somebody else did. On the side that somebody else did, there are four options as to how that might have played itself out. I want to analyze all four, and you'll see that these are really these are the only four. If there are any other ones that come up, you'll see they're just extensions, branches, or slightly different versions of one of these four. These are the four possibilities of how this religion got started if it was not started by God. If it was made up, that's what we're going to try to analyze now. The first option of how this religion got started, if it is not started by God, but rather was started by a human being, is the following scenario. I want to analyze it, but let me tell you the scenario. The scenario goes like this. The scenario is that maybe Moses did not talk to God. No, he lied. And he came down from Mount Sinai and he was holding a book. And he said, "My people, I want to tell you something incredible. When I was up on the mountain, God spoke to me. And he gave me a book. And he told me to give the book to you. What is going to happen when they begin to read it?" Well, let's look over here at the book. This is let's read it in English just so we'll be able to make sure that we are following all the nuanced points. Top paragraph on the left side and the bracketed verses over here, verse number 16. Let's listen carefully to what they will read. On the third day, when it was morning, there was thunder and lightning and heavy cloud on the mountain. And the sound of the shofar was very powerful, and the entire people that was on the camp shuddered. Moses brought the people forth from the camp toward God, and they stood at the bottom of the mountain. All of Mount Sinai was smoking because Hashem had descended upon it in a fire. Its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the entire mountain shuddered exceedingly. The sound of the shofar grew continually much stronger. Moses would speak, and God would respond to him with a voice. What's going to happen when they open up the book and read it? They're going to say, wait a second. The book says that there was a shuddering mountain, and there was smoke, and a loud shofar. I didn't hear any of this. I heard none of this. Moses gave us a book filled with lies. This book said that I saw a mountain shudder, and the book said that smoke went up to heaven, and that there was a shofar. I don't know what is this. What is this book? Seems to be filled with inaccurate information. Let's read the next paragraph. Next paragraph. This is from Yisro. The above one is from Yisro also. The entire people saw the thunder and the flames. Let me read that one more time. The entire people saw the thunder and the flames, the sound of the shofar and the smoking mountain. The people saw and trembled and stood from afar. They said to Moses, "You speak to us and we shall hear. Let God not speak to us lest we die." Moses said to the people, "Do not fear, for in order to elevate you has God come, so that awe of him shall be upon your faces, that you shall not sin." The people stood from afar, and Moses approached the thick cloud where God was. Hashem said to Moses, "So shall you say to the children of Israel, you have seen that I have spoken to you from the heavens." This book claims that God spoke to the entire people. Well, they're going to read this book and say, "It's not true. Moses came down and gave us a book." I don't accept this. This book's full of lies. Let's read the next paragraph. This is from the Aschanan. Over here in the third paragraph, let's go down to the bracketed verses number 11. So you approached and stood at the foot of the mountain, and the mountain was burning with fire to the heart of heaven, darkness, cloud, and a thick cloud. Hashem spoke to you from the midst of the fire. You were hearing the sound of words, but you were not seeing a form, only a sound. He told you, I'm going to read that again. He told you of his covenant that he commanded you to observe the 10 declarations, and he inscribed them in 2 stone tablets. The book claims, he told you. They're going to read this and say, he didn't tell me anything. Moses came down with the book. Let's go to this last paragraph over here. This is from Vaschanan. Moses called all of Israel and said to them, "Hear, O Israel, the decrees and the ordinances that I speak in your ears today. Learn them and be careful to perform them." Listen to this. Hashem our God sealed the covenant with us at Choreb, not with our forefathers did Hashem seal this covenant, but with us, we who are here, all of us alive today. Catch this. Face to face did Hashem speak with you on the mountain from amid the fire. Face to face. The God came down with a book. Let's turn the page. This is the first paragraph on the second side. This is also from Parshas Vaschanan. These words Hashem spoke to your entire congregation on the mountain from the midst of the fire, the cloud, the thick cloud, the great voice, never to be repeated. And he inscribed them to stone tablets, and he gave them to me. It happened that when you heard the voice from the midst of the darkness, and the mountain was burning in fire, that all the heads of your tribes and elders approached me. They said, "Behold, Hashem our God has shown us his glory and his greatness, and we have heard his voice from amidst the fire. This day we saw that Hashem will speak to a person and he can live. But now, why should we die when the great fire consumes us? If we continue to hear the voice of Hashem our God any longer, we will die. For is there any human that has heard the voice of a living God speaking from the midst of the fire as we had and lived?" If Moses came down from Mount Sinai and gave them the book and they read it, they will very unlikely accept it. Because the book is claiming that they saw, heard, experienced things that they know they did not see, hear, and experience. If we're to claim that God didn't start this religion, someone else did, and that someone is Moses, this is very unlikely the way that he started. Because they're not going to buy it. They'll be like, "What is this book filled with lies? I can't accept the book that's filled with lies, especially since apparently the person who's giving to me is lying." I would like to suggest a second scenario. That maybe the way I'm presenting is not exactly the way it might have occurred, but rather I'd like to add a twist. And then I'd like to analyze that. And the twist goes like this. That Moses didn't just come down and say, "Here, when I was in Shemayim, God gave me a book. Here it is." Right? That's not what happened. First, Moses made a mountain jump up and down. And then he made a big loud shofar. And then he made massive gigantic voices that sounded like God. And then he made smoke going up to Shemayim. And then he made fire coming out. And then he gave them the book. And they're like, "Wow, amazing. That's amazing." And that's what happened. This is our second scenario. Again, on the side that God didn't give the Torah, we have four scenarios. The first is that Moses just came down and gave them the book. We've decided that's quite strange and hard to accept. The second one, though, is Moses made a mountain jump up and down, made smoke go up to heaven, made lots of fire, made a voice come out from heaven, and then gave them the book. And they said, "Wow, everything matches up." Now, I would wonder, if I were to tell you I saw somebody do that, would you believe me? I would say, before I came here, I saw a mountain jump up and down, smoke go up to, I saw that. What would you say? You'd say probably not, right? Let's just hold the question until the end. You'd say probably not, right? Why? Because who can do that? You can't do that. And I said, "I'm telling you it happened," right? So say, who could do that? Now let's say it like this. So now I'm telling you, yeah, Moses made a mountain jump up and down. Moses made smoke go. You'd be like, "Well, no one can do that. Who can do that? Who can make smoke go to heaven? Really? Who can make a loud voice to claim that it's God?" If I told you I heard it, yeah, you wouldn't believe it. So I'm telling you that they heard it, right? You say, like, what? That doesn't make any sense. You're telling me that Moses made a mountain jump up and down and made smoke go up to heaven and made fire come out and made God, right? That's probably not the way this religion started. Moses can't do that. I ask you a question. Have you in your life ever seen anybody make a mountain jump up and down? Have you ever seen anybody make smoke? So now you're willing to accept that Moses did that? And they're like, Moses, yeah, there was no electricity, there was no Hollywood, yeah, there was nothing. And Moses in the middle of a desert made all this happen? That's a very hard thing to accept. I would much more likely say that that's probably not the way this religion started than to say that happened that way. Yeah.
A lot of secular people.
But can we hold this question, maybe?
It has to do with this theory.
Okay.
I mean, they know this theory of like that the Jews ran into the desert and they were hot and there was shrooms all over the place and they got hot.
So let me ask you a question.
That don't believe in that will say that they were high and clearly this is what was told them and they believe in it.
Fine. So let me I assume no one in this room is experts in drugs. So not that I am either, but I think we can all accept this part. If you have a number of people many people who all take drugs, you tell me they all see the same thing? No, they don't all see the same thing, and that's why that is probably. And I've given this many times in front of secular people, and they themselves who do have experience with drugs will be right. Oh, you're right. Yeah. Right away they'll say that. Well, you tell me you and your friends are doing drugs together, and you both saw the same thing. Like, oh, you're right. It doesn't happen that way. It doesn't. Okay, fine. So great. So we now analyze two alternate scenarios. Yeah, the first one is that Moses just came down and gave him the book. I said they're going to read it and say it's a lie. So the second was that Moses faked the whole event. But like, Moses can't fake the event. Who can do that? Oh, maybe he did. Maybe he did. Maybe I'm going to kill you. Maybe your mom's not your mom. Maybe the Holocaust didn't happen. Maybes are a dime a dozen. We don't take maybe seriously unless they make sense. To say that a man made a mountain jump up and down doesn't make sense. So I'm assuming this is not, we got two scenarios, neither of these can be the way the religion started, if indeed man started it. So let's try a third scenario. The third scenario goes like this. Forget the whole Moses thing. Moses never existed. What happened? At some point in history, a man decided to start Judaism. And he did. And that's how the religion got started. Maybe it wasn't even Moses. The whole event in Sinai, bluff. Yeah. A man at some point in world history decided to start the religion. Let's analyze this. Before we do, I want to tell you a very interesting historical fact. In the 1400s, there was a 6-month flood in Europe. Now, this wasn't a regular flood. This was an incredible flood. The entirety of Europe was flooded for a period of 6 months. There was a glacier that melted in the very hot summer. And the entirety of Europe was underwater for a period of 6 months. Amazingly, nobody died. And what much more was amazing was that there was a social cooperation between the countries that was really unprecedented, and since then has never occurred, where all of the countries worked together to create boat systems and to create snorkeling systems to allow the entirety of Europe to survive for 6 months without anybody dying. When the summer months came once again, the water evaporated and Europe returned to the way it was, except for a few areas of Vienna. Now, I've now told you this. What are you thinking to yourself?
Not true.
How do you know? Or why do you say why do you think it's not true?
Europeans are all
The Europeans don't work together. Okay, very good. Any other reason? How about what? Oh, you would have heard about it, yeah? Everyone in this room is highly educated, right? You've been through at least 4 years of schooling. if you add all the days you attended together. No, I'm just joking. At least 12 years of schooling, and you have never ever heard of this in your world history class. If you're from Europe, you would have expected that you would have heard this, right? You're from England, never heard this, and that's very bizarre, yeah. And so you're thinking to yourself, I don't know. I don't think I can accept this as being historically accurate because it's something I would have heard of before, at least somewhere. I don't have to come to some Middle Eastern country, yeah, and hear for the first time something that I should have heard or in school growing up, yeah. And one of the gauges in which we gauge whether or not something that's claimed historically is a legend or historical fact is this something I should have heard of before? And if something I should have heard of before, I'm going to find this to be a very weak claim. And I'm probably not going to accept it. Are we following this so far? Okay. So let's pretend that this event at Mount Sinai was made up at some point in history. So now let's paint the scene. Bill is walking through the shuk one day holding a scroll. Fred comes up to him and says, Bill, what are you holding? He's like, wow, am I glad you asked. Come to my house tonight, midnight. Well, that's what happens. Knocks on his door, and Fred knocks on Bill's door at midnight. Bill brings him in, sits him on the floor, candles, says to him, okay, let me tell you about the scroll. This scroll is from God. He gave it to 3 million people on a mountain. Everybody forgot, except for me. You are a descendant, Bill, Fred. You are a descendant of one of these individuals who stood at the mountain. So you need to go circumcise yourself. What do you think is going to happen? Fred is going to be like, yeah, no, right? I don't think so. Fred's going to say to himself, are you telling me that God appeared on a mountain in front of 3 million people and nobody remembers? It's very strange. It's very, very strange. See, the rule of thumb is like this, is that you can convince people of a lot of things, but the one thing you cannot convince people of is that God appeared on a mountain in front of 3 million people and everybody forgot. What's my proof? My proof is that in 15,000 religions, none of them claim that happened except for one. Why not? That's the better claim. Claim God came and said to a group of people, I'm God. Why did no religion do that? That's a much smarter thing for a religion maker upper to do. That's a much more reasonable thing for you. Never want to give a message to one person. Like, go tell everybody else. Just you tell them yourself, God. Why would religion maker uppers ever claim that God told one person as opposed to God going and telling everybody? I'll tell you why. Because you can't pull that off. No, everyone's going to say, really? God appeared to millions of people? That no one remembers it? Can't be. It can't be. And if it could be, why did nobody claim it? It's a much better claim. You can convince people of a lot of things. The one thing you cannot convince people of is that there was a national revelation of God and somehow everyone forgot about it. I'll tell you something interesting. The Christians, so their claim was that God changed his mind. That there was a point in history when God chose the Jews, but for whatever reason he changed his mind. So now I have a question for you. Why don't the Christians now say that God created another national revelation and reappeared and said, hi, I'm back, we're changing the script. Yeah, we're doing things again. Why didn't God do that? I mean, the first time he came, why didn't he do it as a national revelation? I don't understand. The reason is because nobody's going to believe it. You can't tell people national revelation happened if it didn't happen. You can't claim that God appeared to people and nobody knows about it. So the Christians had to say, God appeared to Jesus. I'll ask you another question. Yeah, the Muslims. The Muslims claimed that God changed his mind another time. Yeah? He picked the Jews, changed his mind, picked the Christians, changed his mind, then he picked the Muslims. So now I have a question. Why did the Muslims say? Well, God appeared again in front of the Jews and said, I changed my mind, or in front of the Christians, I changed my mind. Why did the Muslims claim that? The Muslims don't claim it because no one's going to believe it. They'll be like, he didn't. Oh, nobody knows about it. Oh, no one knows about it. How do I believe it? Yeah. You cannot claim that God appeared in front of a group of people and no one knows that that's true. You can convince people of a lot of things. But one thing you can't convince people of is a national revelation. And it's interesting because, firstly, just to point out, by the way, that most of the world believes in this national revelation. Christians believe in Muslims believe in it. They all believe God appeared on a mountain in front of 3 million people. The only group that's having a trouble with it are the Jews. Actually, the Jews are not so sure, but everyone else is okay with it. But let me point something out to you, because it gets even stranger. Christianity is a really easy sell. Actually, imagine if someone were to come up to you today and say, "Listen, I'm a prophet. God spoke to me and said, you don't have to keep Torah anymore." Right? You'd be like, wow, I'm in. Right? Right? Prove to me you're a prophet. Walk on water. I'm in. Yeah, that's it. I'm in. Right? But now let's say someone came to you and said, look, I'm a prophet, and God appeared to a lot of people who forgot about it, and now you can't eat any of your favorite foods. You have to close your stores on the Sabbath. You probably have to divorce your wife. Right? Okay, that may be the appealing part depending on the situation. But, right? And right? So, but what about this family? Purity and all that. This is a very hard sell. Yeah? How did Christianity spread? Well, it's very simple. They got a bunch of spears and knives, and they went into every single city, and anyone who didn't convert to Christianity, they killed them. Now that's a good way to start a religion, right? You just kill everyone who doesn't believe in you, and by default you become quite large. How did Islam spread? Very simply, they went through all of Europe and they murdered anybody who didn't believe in Muslim. How did the Jews start? Well, first of all, we don't kill anybody who doesn't believe in us. And not only that, but if anyone wants to try to join us, we tell them get away. Right? So what we're talking about we're coming with a crazy claim. God appeared to millions of people. Everyone forgot about it. And by the way, if you want to convert us, we don't let you. Right? You're talking about a very strange situation. You can convince people of a lot of things. One thing you cannot convince people of is that God appeared in front of 3 million people and everyone forgot about it. And we're looking at alternatives. That is an alternative that's very, very hard to say. I'll tell you something interesting even more. If you look at this last paragraph, I'm not going to read it inside because we're a bit short on time, but you can read it yourself. This is in Parashas Vaschan. I'm sure you're familiar with these psukim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling future generations the following. Listen carefully to this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling the future generations, he says, future generations, yeah, look around the world and you will see that no other religion has ever claimed a national revelation. Again, he's talking to us, future generations, us, yeah, and everyone since Ma'amad Har Sinai. Look around the world and you'll see that no one has ever claimed a national revelation. Now, this happens to be true. That no one has ever, I told you, 14,999 people, no one's ever claimed, religions, no one's ever claimed a national revelation. But what's even, and so this prophecy happens to be accurate. But I have a bigger question for you. My question is, what type of silly thing is this for someone to write if it wasn't written by God? Imagine someone just pulled off tricking people into believing that God appeared on a mountain in front of 3 million people, and they're all like, okay, everyone forgot, we're in, yeah? Then he's going to write that no one else is ever going to claim a national revelation. That was pretty silly to do. He just did it. Meaning the author knew that there would never ever be another claim of national revelation by any other religion in world history. He knew that. And he took a very big risk by writing it. Because what if there is? If there's one other religion that claims a national revelation, this guy's toast. You get it? That's a pretty silly thing to write. Apparently the author knew that there would never be another national revelation. And he was correct. Now there's one more scenario which is going to take about a minute and then I'm going to end. And this is our fourth scenario, and then we'll summarize and then we'll be done. And it goes like this. So maybe we've now concluded that to say that at some point in history some man just invented the religion is a very difficult thing to do, because the Torah says that God appeared on a mountain and there's 600,000 men between 20 and 60, and that you make a cheshbon, it comes out to 3 million people. Yeah, it's a very hard thing to make up. And, I mean, it's an easy thing to make up, but it's a hard thing to get people to believe, if not impossible. So let's say it like this. Maybe the religion started like this. When it originally started, there were no psukim in the Torah that spoke about national revelation. It was just a book of morals. It was just the halachas. Or may have had Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, maybe, but it didn't talk anything about national revelation. And maybe all it said is that God appeared to Moses. Later on in history, somebody added in all the verses about national revelation. And so now we have a book that talks about national revelation. But that was added in after there was a large group of people already bought into the religion. Then they added that in, and that's how they got the religion started. Well, I don't know if you're already picking up on the very serious problem with this happening, but imagine if someone were to pop up with now and say, by the way, I found the Torah that discusses flying elephants, right? So you might have some people that believe them, but you're going to have a large group of people that don't. And in fact, there's probably going to be a lot of fights amongst Jews. Yeah, about, well, I'm the elephant believer, I'm not the elephant believer, right? Imagine someone comes and says, by the way, this book, there's a whole nother part of it that was actually left out. National revelation. Be like, really? Yeah, oh yeah. Well, wouldn't you expect that there's going to be the revelationists and the non-revelationists, and that there's going to be now two branches of Judaism, those who claim that God spoke to Moses without speaking to the Jews, and those who spoke to the whole Jewish people. And we have no historical evidence, even with people trying to debunk Judaism, we never claimed such a thing like that. You'd expect we have two versions of the Torah. We'd have find some scrolls without the revelation in it, some with the revelation. You'd expect to have so many things that we don't have. So it becomes a very unreasonable claim. Maybe the Holocaust didn't happen. Maybe the Revolutionary War didn't happen. Maybe your mom's not your mom. You can say maybe. Maybe someone added these psukim in the Torah. You could say that, but it's a very unreasonable thing to say. So what we've now done is we've discussed the fact that there are only two options. Either God gave the Torah or man made up the religion. On the side that man made up religion, there are four options. We've been through each option. Either Moses came down and gave him the book, or Moses did the whole national revelation thing, or by himself and he made the whole thing up, or someone later in history convinced people that this national revelation occurred, or at some point they added in the psukim about national revelation. We've gone through all of these scenarios, and we've concluded that these are in order to accept these, you have to take a lot of unreasonable steps. Whether that Moses can make a mountain jump up and down, or they can convince people about a national revelation when no other religion has been successful in doing so, or that somehow they just totally bought into it knowing that the book is lying to them. The reasonable conclusion is indeed that the event occurred the way it's claimed that it occurred. And that the event at Har Sinai can be categorized as a historical event, just like any other historical event in world history, be it the Holocaust, be it the Revolutionary War, that even though none of us have seen it, all the arrows point in the direction that it occurred. And even though you can always spin up a maybe, but maybes are a dime a dozen, and we don't accept maybes if they're unreasonable. All of the maybes about the alternatives of how this religion got started are highly unreasonable. And the initial question that we asked is, can we remain logical, intellectual, thinking, philosophical people and still believe that this event at Mount Sinai occurred? I'd like to turn the question on its head. Can we remain logical, thinking, philosophical people and say that this event at Mount Sinai didn't occur? That's the conclusion I'd like to come to. Thank you very much. Have a good Tvach.